So indeed, we have Cédric O. So we were supposed to have Cédric O on stage after a long planning process that took some time. And it happens he's not going to be there because he has to be this morning for a special meeting with the president on the COVID response plan. So, well, you know, the QCB has been in preparation for about a year now, and we chose to be resilient until the end. So we were able to record him yesterday evening very late. And we're going to watch that. I mean, it's about 26 minutes. We're going to watch what Cédric told us yesterday about this plan. Let's roll the tape, please. Cédric, you've been in charge of the digital economy and telecom in the French government since April 19, so it's a while ago. And I've known you for a while, and what I know is you've been the sponsor, and you've been at the origin of the launching the quantum plan. And so it's up to you to explain us what was the background of this plan, where we are today, and then we will discuss a little bit about the position of France in the global ecosystem of quantum technologies. Up to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Olivier. This is something that we've been working on together for a long time now. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to take the floor in that 2020 QCB conference. I heard that this year the 2020 QCB conference has overtaken the QC Wear in San Jose. So I think this is to some extent quite a symbol of the role that France wants to play within that quantum computing, but not only quantum computing domain, and the ambition that we are trying to achieve. Well, not to be too long, and maybe to share with you a few ideas. I think that there are some key critical technologies. We can think of obviously quantum, but also AI, cybersecurity, maybe also in biotech, some key critical technologies on which the international competition is focusing, and that will determine the competitiveness, but also to some extent the sovereignty of the state in the years to come. And in France, we truly believe, but I think this is something that is shared by the participants to this conference, but also by other countries, that we have to invest now and to be able to frame our ecosystem now in order to be able to be at the right level of commitment in the years to come in that competition for some key critical technologies. This is, by the way, true at the French level, but this is all the more true at the European level. We are seeing these days a lot of countries unveiling their national strategic plan. I think that the US a few weeks ago announced their own plans as far as quantum computing is concerned. We all know that China is really involved. UK has a really well-structured plan on that issue. And what we think is that this is really something that we have to be able to tackle at the right level of commitment for many reasons. The first reason, and this is something that is, I think, shared by all the participants, is the possibility that quantum will overhaul, to some extent, a lot of business, being in the healthcare business, in the manufacturing business, in the weather prediction business, a lot of business, because of the power because of the calculation power. That will reach a tremendous horizon. And the other issue that we need to be aware of is the sovereign issue. And I think there are not so many technologies in which sovereignty is at stake at this level. This is true about communication. This is true about, obviously, competitiveness of the calculation schemes, but also encryption and so on and so on. And this is why we think that this is really something that we want to be at the rendezvous, as we say, because we need to do it. We were supposed to announce a national strategy these days, and this is something on which the president himself is really committed, because he was committed the same way in the AI artificial intelligence plan that we presented a few months ago. And this is something, technology, in which the president himself is really committed. Well, taking into account the current healthcare situation, it's not so easy, so we had to postpone it. But there are a few things that I can share with you. The first one is that France will be within the international standards in terms of investment. I think that if we look at the landscape or the environment as far as quantum computing is concerned, Europe has really a role to play. The quality of the researchers, the quality of the academic level in Europe, the quality of the firms, and so on, makes it possible for Europe to be really at the table of the best countries. But we have now to frame and to structure the ecosystem. I think this is the main. This is a question of organization, and we want to appoint a national strategy coordinator that will coordinate the whole effort of France. And this is also a question of even investment, and this is something that I cannot unveil today, but will be at the right level of commitment. What we want to be is to be at the same level of investment than the international standards, and that in the same level of investment than the plans that have been unveiled so far. And we will be that we will do in the coming months. And this is really something that the president himself is committed on. Last thing that I want to share with you is I think that there are few technologies, AI, for instance, I mentioned earlier, in which some position has already been cooked by some players. And taking into account the growing size of the data lake, for instance, in the B2C sectors, it's going to be hard for some European players to bridge the gap. I think what's really interesting with quantum computing is that it's still a green field, and that there are so many uncertainties as far as the kind of technologies, the potential of each technologies, and so many technical and scientific opportunities that this is now that we have to invest, and this is now that we have to commit within that technology, because this is now that we can build position for the future.
Thank you, Cedric. Elam, you want to start?
Yes, I can start. Thank you very much, Frederic, for this landscape. Maybe I start a little bit also with the history. I remember a year ago when we met, you showed your enthusiasm and interest about quantum computing, but you also pushed on all of us in that famous dinner to discuss practical impact of quantum tech. Now I have my chance to ask the same question from you. What are the perceived impact of quantum tech that you think France is going to focus on in coming years?
Well, I think that there are three areas, two that are really limited and which we can focus, and another one that in which there are much more uncertainty. The two first, obviously, are sensors. The first one, and we know that, for instance, a company such as Thales has really good ability and capacities in that domain, and this is also linked, obviously, with economic opportunities, but also obviously strategic opportunities for detecting movements, things like this. Second one is encryption, and we see, for instance, what has been done by the Chinese so far in that area. And I think this is something on which all the countries will focus on because of the strategic implication of that technology. Mm-hmm. I mean, if someone is able to break the keys or to take a competitive edge in that area, then it will entail a lot of issues on the worldwide on the international map. And the last one, which is still uncertain, is to what horizon the calculation power will take us. And I think this is here the potential, for instance, for I don't know, molecular simulation or things like this are really huge. But this is difficult today to assess which technology will take the lead, how we can reach some kind of stability that will allow us to go to what extent. And so there are a lot of uncertainty. But what I think is really interesting with quantum, maybe even more than with artificial intelligence, is the dream power of the technology. I mean, we're to some extent touching magic, and I think this is really something that can help us make people dream about the technology.
By the way, you've been involved in the telecom side of the digital economy recently, and you've seen some pushback on 5G. Do you think there is a potential to have a similar pushback on quantum technologies? And what do you think, the community, the research community, the entrepreneurship community should do to avoid the symptoms and the syndromes we have right now on 5G and other new tech? Is there something we could do in advance?
I think that there isn't a risk of a pushback on quantum computing. There is certainly there will certainly be some pushback on the quantum computing, and this is obviously a French issue. But what we are seeing all over the world is that to some extent, for part of the population, tech has become part of the problem, and I deeply believe, if we take a step back, that today in the backlash of the middle class that is embodying by what we see in the US, the Brexit, the yellow vest movement in France, there is a question about technology. Is at the end of the day technology good for the community, or is it only good for technology? And is technology good for the community or only for the tech people? And I think that the question will spread more and more in the Western world. So I think if we want to convince people that we have to go and we have to continue to develop quantum computing, because it will entail a lot of good and a lot of something that is really tangible good. For instance, in terms of being able to develop new being able to cure some diseases, or to simulate things that would help us solve problem in the health domain. I think that the main issue, and actually this is the problem that we have with 5G, because to be honest, with 5G we have to be able to explain what it will give people on a day-to-day basis, and we can not only answer that there is no environmental problem and that there is no health problem. The problem is that the question people are asking is, why a new technology? Why do we need a new technology? And I think that being able to answer the question that was asked by Elam is something that we have to be able to do in the coming months. I think that science for science or technology for technology is not something that is sustainable anymore in the public domain.
In fact, there is another challenge. Talking of what you were saying, it come to my mind is that I'll say that in one hand, we want to know about impact, and you're saying that we should talk about what can be given in daily life. But yet, something special about quantum is that we know that it's not a marathon. Sorry, we know that it's a marathon, but not a sprint race. That's what I wanted to say that. So in a sense, in order to achieve, especially about quantum computing, computation advances that you're saying, this is a long-term plan. So to somehow there is this paradox that, while we want to address all this ethical issue that you're raising, how can we ensure that in France that we are about to launch this new program? This is a long-term investment and commitment that goes beyond the daily things, because it's a marathon.
And I think what's interesting in the public debate with science is that, and this is something that is really completely changing the life of scientists, is that so far you could do your research, be in your field, and don't think about the impact of what you were doing on the society. Obviously, if you were working on some schemes that were allowing to develop a nuclear bomb, you could have some ethical issues. But now, when we are talking about 5G, we are talking about ethics. And the question of the sense and of the impact will be raised to the scientists. And this is completely overhauling the way they are seeing their role in their society, but also completely changing, I think, their day-to-day work, because they have to take care about things like, to some extent, they don't want to take care because they are saying, well, I'm a researcher in quantum computing. I don't want to. I just want to focus on my math and on my research. But well, you cannot be limited to that reason today.
Do you think quantum scientists and researchers and quantum entrepreneurs should be more visible to explain that to society? Isn't there a problem in other fields where we don't have enough exposure?
As we say in France, la nature a horreur du vide. I mean, if nobody is taking the place, then somebody else will take it. And if you're not advocating for the benefits of quantum computing, then you're leaving the room for someone explaining what are the problems with it. So you have to take the lead. And I think that this is something that we have not been able to do on the 5G in France, for instance. This is something that we are having a problem because there are real problems with AI. But I think that the question on how you frame the debate. If you are making people dream about quantum because it will open new horizon for them, it will be a new moon to land on, then it's really difficult. Then it's really different than someone saying, okay, they're doing this, for instance, to develop new nuclear bombs. And then it's framing the debate from the origin.
So talking about quantum dream, let's go to this side. So what would you define success from your point of view? What is the success of quantum now that you started it? What do you want to see in 10 years' time we have achieved in France?
It's a really good question. I would say, well, there are two ways to answer it. The first one is to answer from a scientific point of view, to put it like this, is to say the economical impact on the French economy. And how will we be able to develop, to be on the par with what we are expecting today? This is the first issue, to be able to assess the competitiveness of the French companies, or maybe the emergence of new champions based on quantum computing. But considering my recent experience as far as 5G is concerned, as far as facial recognition is concerned, I would say that another KPI would be the acceptance by the public. I mean, can we find an edge way which is not causing not too much turmoil? Are we able to explain from a rational point of view what this can bring about for the society, and how we can handle the future of technology, especially as far as quantum computing is concerned? I think this is one of the main questions that in the Western world we have to answer. The Asia that I know very well, because my father is Korean, has not the same issue with technology. They still consider it natural or normal, or they see only the bright side of it. We are trying we are evolving in the Western world for many reasons that are cultural and so on. But I think that we have to solve our relationship to technology, and quantum could be a good example.
You've been involved in the design of the AI plan 2 years ago, and now you're involved in that plan. You work also on the cloud computing. I've got two questions related, one with the other. Is what do you think is different with the quantum plan, even though you can't describe the details of the plan, meaning about the balances? I mean, the balance between investment in research, in helping entrepreneurs, in helping maybe government to adopt the technology, which is the three kinds of things we do usually. And the last one, it will be maybe your conclusion, is What do you think we should do in Europe, within Europe, to create not just French companies or German companies or Dutch companies? What could we do from the government side, also from the private sector side, to create so-called Airbus of quantum technologies? What could be the way to achieve that result?
Well, there is a huge difference between the feeling that we had at the time of the AI plan, as an AI strategy, and quantum computing. When we started to design the French national strategy on artificial intelligence, we already knew that we were lagging behind, and there was that huge feeling of well, maybe in some areas the match is done. There are a lot of matches that can be played. For instance, in B2B sectors, in AI applied to environment, to logistics, to transportation, to healthcare, and I really believe that Europe has a role to play in those areas. But as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, in some areas, especially in the B2C domain, we already knew, and we still know that, well, it's going to be difficult to bridge a gap, with the impression that American and Chinese players have exponentially growing data lakes, and so the match would be really difficult. The difference in quantum computing is that it's really less mature technology. It's still in its infancy, and so we can play the game. And so the feeling is really different about quantum. And if you look at the underlying trend all over the world, and what are the assets of Europe, China, and the US, well, you can definitely assess the fact that Europe has a role to play, and it's not lagging behind. But you have to take the train now. So the feeling is really different, and I think the perspective is really different. Between the two.
Yeah, but how does it translate in the plan itself? I mean, is there a different way to invest the bucks, the public bucks and private bucks? Is there a different way to collaborate at an international basis?
There are some similarities, which is you have to invest a critical amount of money in order to be at the right level of commitment. But the main issue is maybe not to invest, is to structure a real ecosystem. And I think, by the way, I think that everything is always about the ecosystem, and this is and we had the same issue in AI than we have today in quantum, but the difference was that in AI we were already lagging behind, and the other ecosystem were already structured, and that they are already the gravity power that was already attracting the best talent, the highest investment. This is not the case so far in quantum. So we have to structure the ecosystem. That's why we are appointing a national coordinator. And this is why we want now to help the ecosystem in the region of Paris, the ecosystem in Grenoble, etc., to structure. So there are some similarities, but I think that the time frame is really different.
The last one is Saclay.
Yes, this is why I mentioned the region of Paris and not Paris.
The region of Paris, okay, Paris and Saclay, and other places in France.
I don't want to enter in that debate. So I mentioned, quote, the region me Paris.
Region of Paris, okay, right.
This is for the French researchers.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
This allows me to tackle the whole Parisian region.
And the rest of France, by the way, there are still labs and entrepreneurs outside Paris and Grenoble, so we shouldn't forget them.
To get back to your second question, which was about Europe, I think that building a European Airbus in new technology is not about merging some existing companies. That won't happen. And taking the power of Thales to merge it with the power of, I don't know, whoever, SAP, say. Okay. The next European Airbus will be a French researcher or a French entrepreneur co-creating a company, co-founding a company with a German researcher or a German entrepreneur. And this will entail an Airbus in new technologies. This is why I think that what we have to do is to cross-fertilize the two ecosystems in research and allow entrepreneurs to know better each other.
Maybe not just Germany, by the way, not just Germany in Europe.
No, not just Germany, but you are mentioning Airbus.
Yeah,
other country, but I think that this is something that we have to work on with the Netherlands, for instance, that we know has a lot of capacities as far as quantum computing is concerned, but also the Nordics and other countries. And I think this is a question about interpersonal relation. And what we have to build are those relations between persons, between researchers, between laboratories, in order. And I think that this will entail a lot of companies and a lot of results on the academic in the academic domain in the coming years.
Okay, I think we should close now. Elan, maybe last remark, no?
Just thank you very much for your commitment,
for
your enthusiasm, and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. And next time at the QCB, you're going to be there.
Yeah.
Maybe we switch gear and change place. Thank you, Cedric, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was great, no?
Yep.
So a committed minister, middle of the night, telling us about quantum. But let me just, for our international audience, tell everyone that, as you can imagine, in any other national program, there has been a large effort from academia, from the community, from industry, from the big company, startup, which has prepared this ecosystem. We will hear about it in the last panel. Don't miss it. So this long work and the task force that has been putting it brought us to here, which is very exciting to really push it. France is ready.
Yeah, and just to paraphrase a little bit what Cedric said, even though the plan was not officially announced, there's a lot of behind-the-scene work being done. I mean, not just around the ecosystem, also working on how to launch projects, because there's going to be a lot of RFPs to fund projects, whether it's for research or other kinds of organizations, I mean, startups and others. There's a lot of administrative work to launch before even the plan is officially announced. So that's going to be a key job for the coordinator of the plan. So maybe if somebody in the audience is a volunteer to coordinate the plan, you can try. You can send your resume to SGPI, and I don't know if international audiences could do that, but at least the French folks could do that to try to run the plan.